Thank you, Ernie. You know, there was a lot of discussion in the board level and ex-com level whether or not we should continue on with the gala considering what's happening this year. First, of course, we had the storm and the recovery efforts of the storm, but also we have, it's political season, and I don't know what happened to the $25 lunch plates, but they're no longer available. It's now 100 times more, so it's $250 just to attend, so, but we know there's a lot of pressure on that. As such, we did sit down and with Ernie and the team, and we felt that we should continue to have the gala, but maybe make some adjustments accordingly to reflect what's happening, but still make it a fun event as Ernie always does. Okay, so now I've got just a few things. I mentioned the last meeting that we were looking to possibly raise membership fees. In light of what's happening here locally with the storm and also understanding the impact of the political season, I just want to thank our treasurer, Kim Anderson, and our president, Catherine Castro, because they went into the budget and they really took a hard dive into it, cutting down the revenues, making it flatline, and then and looking at the expenses as closely as possible, but also being a little bit aggressive on that, so we can, rather than being conservative, we were a little bit aggressive, just to know what we'll end up at. So with that, they came back with a budget where we think we will end up the year with maybe an $80,000 operating loss for the chamber. Fortunate thing that under Catherine's stewardship, she's been able to accumulate some balances, cash balances, which we would be able to offset. The other push that the board will be doing is a membership drive, trying to increase our membership as the overall membership over the years has slowly declined, and while we have received new members, it hasn't been enough to offset any of the decline. So that's very positive, and I just want to give a thanks and a shout out to Catherine and Kim, because we will withhold any membership increases for this year and possibly look at it for next year. So if we can give them a round of applause. You know, I just came back from Saipan. I flew out there yesterday, and you know, the pictures and the stuff that you see, you really can't feel it until you land there. A lot of the telephone poles are down, the wooden ones that we weren't able to replace. But the storm hovered over the island for so many hours that even some of the concrete poles that we put on since U2 and Silver started to lean because the ground was wet so much. And so there's a lot of things to build up. It's going to take months before a lot of people can get their power back. Water is a big situation. The stores, while they have certain brands, the lower end brands have run out. And so, you know, people don't want to walk in and buy Fiji water. They want to be able to buy some drinking water, etc. Even to be able to wash clothes and to be able to bathe, that's even become a challenge where one of my staff had mentioned that she had taken her drinking water and is using that to be able to bathe and to be able to help her children. So keep your prayers out for them, and as the Commodore had mentioned, and Ernie with the Judah Foundation, if there's anything you can give, everything I'm sure will be greatly appreciated. For me personally, I was stuck. I was trying to get back my time. 2 flights were canceled. By the time I arrived, the storm had already passed. But I hate being away when things like this happen. Number one, I hate being away. Number two, we were stuck in Hawaii, and it gave Mrs. Antalan a chance to help it spike the economy there, which I wasn't very appreciative of. But you know, that's all I have for now, because I'm actually excited to listen to our guest speaker. So before doing so, I'm going to transfer it over to our president, Ms. Catherine Castro. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just very quickly, just a few announcements. So we had a couple of things that were canceled, obviously due to the storm, but we're happy to announce the reschedule. So the GYP's general membership meeting that was scheduled in April is now scheduled for Thursday, May 14th. That is featuring Frank the Crank Camacho and Barbie Agahan. So GYP members have a very special registration fee, so please make sure that you register. And everybody else has a not so special registration fee, but that's okay, it's gonna be a great event. So May 14th, the GYP general membership meeting at the chamber office. And the AFC's A Conversation with J9 was also rescheduled, and that has been rescheduled to May 28th. That's a Thursday. So if you're an AFC member, the registration portal is open to you. If you're not an AFC member, please come see us if you're interested in attending this event. And now on to the main event. Our guest speaker is a tenured professor of economics and the dean of the School of Business and Public Administration at the University of Guam. She received her PhD from the University of Pennsylvania. She is an institutional economist specializing in development economics. Our speaker holds a Master of Arts degree in City and Regional Planning and a Master of Government Administration from Samuel Fels Center of Government at the University of Pennsylvania. Her research focuses on regional economic development. As dean, she works with regional business communities and institutions of higher education to address issues of workforce, public policy, and business investment. Members and guests, please join me in welcoming our guest speaker, Dr. Roseanne Jones.
I want to thank you all for joining me today for this presentation. Catherine, when she first reached out to me and she said, would you talk to the chamber? I said, of course I will. We work very closely with the chamber. We appreciate the Guam young professionals who do so much for our students at the School of Business and Public Administration. So of course I will do this. And then she said, what I'd like you to talk about is the impact of the Iran war on Guam's economy. And for a moment, I took a deep breath and I said, does anyone know what that is? So it's quite a tough act to address that. And so I've put together a few slides, and I'm not sure that they're all that clear up there, but I can share them with you afterwards. But I turned the topic a little bit from looking at the Iran war and focusing more on Guam's economy. And the topic of this, the focus that brings us to light today, is this idea of Guam's economy in disruptive conditions. Now I have to tell you that I put this slide presentation together before Sinlaku. Sinlaku only reinforced that what we do together in an economy here is really working in the difficult, challenging places in disruptive economic situations, and we're good at it. We're so good at it that the feedback that I get from students who work here, and also students who are employed in the United States after graduating from the University of Guam, I get calls from their employers saying, can you send more of those folks? And I wonder what they're asking for, and then they say they know how to work. They know how to work with very limited resources, roll up their sleeves and get the job done. And I think that is the culture and the environment in which we're working. So this disruptive conditions theme is something that I'd like to speak to today. Pushing the button, it's not moving. Oh, there you go. back. Oh. All right. Lesson number 1. Please. You're probably closer to the computer. All right. So in this context of the nature of disruption, I'd like to speak to the history of it. As a history that I became familiar with when I arrived here on Guam in 1997. At that time, I was here and pleased to be able to look at the impact of the Asian financial crisis. And through the Asian financial crisis, we were able to look at the currency volatility and the regional contagion that spread throughout this region. Following that, in 2008, we had the global financial crisis, from which we learned about credit crunch that we had and the demand side problems that we had. In 2023, we had COVID-19, and we're still recovering from the tourism collapse and the supply shock from that. And here in 2026, we have the Iran war, in which we're seeing the global reach, the geopolitical origin, and the stagflationary effects. And stagflation is the biggest problem in the room. It is a condition where we have very high inflation, and we have economies that are struggling to stay afloat. So they can't build out to address the inflation. Next slide, please. So the emerging portrait that we'd like to look at is what's happening right now. And this is a snapshot as of April 2026. And a lot of these numbers are still not landing. They're still very, very fluid. If we look at the price of Brent crude oil, it's been anywhere from $100 to $120 a barrel plus. 20% of the ships that supply that oil pass through the Straits of Hormuz. There's been a 30% rise in shipping costs. And the World Trade Organization projects a 0.3% reduction in the 2026 global GDP. Now, 0.3% doesn't sound like very much until the top line figure is $100 trillion. So that 0.3% is taking that out of the global economy. It's deflationary all across the board. Next slide, please. When we look at Guam's economy, we begin to look at its airlift capacity, and it's under pressure. Jet fuel costs more to produce, and it's targeted somewhere around $197 a barrel. And again, it's very fluid. It may not be that number right at this moment. But that's a 118% increase from February 2026. Quite a jump. And we're realizing it in an economy that has one of its key pillars, the tourism sector. Philippine Airlines established a route between Cebu and Guam. They announced it in December, and they've closed it in April. Air Busan, direct flights between Busan and Guam, they are in risk-cutting mode and saying long-distance flights over water, which burns more aviation fuel, which doesn't necessarily have an enduring demand, they're pausing that flight. Korean Air, Asiana are continuing their flights, but with higher cost per seat, somewhere on the order of $385 one way. United Airlines. United Airlines has been modeling its fuel cost at about $172 per barrel. It expects elevated prices through the end of 2027. Next slide. So where does Guam stand? Well, if we look at tourism, we had a very good start to the beginning of the year. In fact, we had a higher rate of tourist arrivals, about a 3.8% increase over 2024. And 2026 was looking to be an up year, especially after COVID. But after the disruption of the Iran war, the fuel prices, tourism is likely not going to sustain that. On the defense sector side, the other pillar, there's $2.2 billion that is circulating, and that's unchanged. There are federal contracts, there are appropriations, there are commitments. The message here is defense continues, that sector continues to be the stability of Guam's economy. But as we'll see later, it's only going to last so long in the form that it's in now, the buildup. In employment, we were beginning to see some increase in employment. It was returning following COVID and some of the other return to business growth. We have a top line of about 68,440 in the employment workforce, the private sector workforce. And that's a significant increase over past. So we were gaining jobs. But the red line here, that last sector, which I call energy cost, is really critical. It cuts across all of this. And I'm not just talking about jet fuel or other kinds of fuel. We're talking about energy that supports the entirety of the island of Guam. Gasoline is an indicator, and we're seeing that each one of us at the pump. The price has increased, but it's not just that. It's not just for household use. We're concerned about fuel oil, GPA generation, diesel that power our freight and backup power, aviation fuel, which I've mentioned earlier. They're all going in the same direction. GPA's fuel bill exceeds half of its operating budget. Every ratepayer in this room pays additionally through the LEAK program. So every one of your power bills are reflecting that dependency. Next slide, please. So Guam's strategic position, where are we with this? Our geography is not necessarily our destiny, but it is reorganizing into the Indo-Pacific its leverage. The marine relocation from Okinawa continues. It's on schedule. Military construction in 2026 is on track to exceed 2025 levels. The Sea Dragon 2026 multinational exercises are active, and a more dangerous Indo-Pacific means more U.S. investments here, not less. So the political read on this is defense spending is structural. It's not fashion. It's not discretionary. It does not pause for global volatility. The third pillar problem that we have is real. The military buildup, and in military terms they call it the surge, is likely to continue for 7 to 9 years. It's after the surge that the military refers to as sustainment. We all need to be looking at the future of sustainment. What does that look like after the surge is over? What are we putting in place to carry forward the economic activity that has been underwritten by the buildup? Businesses positioned for defense are going to be in demand. And we're seeing some of that now with the increase in the presence of advanced and additive manufacturing. The real-time delivery of parts and products needed to support military operations. Now that does have some spillover. As I've talked to car dealerships, they said, we would like some of that too. We need real-time parts. It advances our supply chain. There was a point in time where we never imagined Guam as having a manufacturing base. We were always military tourism. But the private sector is rising around manufacturing. And as I see it at the School of Business and Public Administration, I'm getting demands and questions all the time for how are you preparing people to work in manufacturing operations. And it's an area that we're going to address because we see the outlook moving in somewhat in that direction. Next slide, please. So where does our vulnerability sit? Well, in tourism, in 3 to 5 years, maybe a full recovery. But we expect higher fares. Japanese and Korean leisure visitors already are squeezed by the weak yen and the won. The Iran conflict adds more pressure. Cost squeeze, we're all feeling that with energy, freight, and insurance. Insurance costs have risen dramatically because of the risk associated with the Iran war. Structural risks, again, as I've just mentioned, in 7 to 9 years, the military buildup, the surge is going to decline and give way to a new path, which is more for the private sector to figure out what are we putting in place so that we can look like other communities in which they have tourism as well as industry. Next slide. So how to position for now? You need to protect what you have. Know your energy cost exposure to the dollar. Rebuild your cash reserves. Treat it as an emergency. Negotiate freight contracts before surcharges land if they haven't already. You need to adapt. You need to audit your fixed cost structure, your tourism-dependent businesses especially. You need to identify defense adjacent demand in your sector. What do you have to offer? And you need to diversify your revenue streams before the construction cycle ends. You need to also advance and move while others wait. Too many people are trying to figure out what's the picture look like. Wait, let's wait until it takes shape. You can't wait. You have opportunities for mergers and acquisitions, for partnerships, to advance and gain market share. We have experienced that businesses that acted quickly during COVID recovered faster and stronger. This disruption will also pass. Your positioning is not a reset that automatically is going to happen. You have to drive that. Next slide. So in summary, what can you do? Know your energy cost exposure, go to your freight and supplier contracts now, rebuild your cash reserves, and if you're tourism dependent with high fixed costs, you want to begin to restructure that and position for defense adjacent demand now. As I said, when I put this together, I hadn't been thinking much about typhoons, but here we are. And we have a history with typhoon and typhoon management and recovery. In 1997, you had in December Typhoon Paka, with island-wide power outages and about 14,000 or more applications for assistance. Pangsonghua in 2002 and Chataan, 73 million came to the island because of that storm. Equivalent of 1,300 homes were destroyed, and direct investments were made by the federal government. Typhoon Mawar, which was not that far past, 2023, 338 million, 71 million from FEMA, and 257 million from SBA loans flowed through the economy. For a while, and you can see the pattern here, folks believed that typhoons were a moneymaker. We love typhoons. It brings in all of this federal money. But now here we are with Super Typhoon Sinlaku, and we're following this. But the interesting thing here, and I don't know all of your personal experiences, but my personal experience is the difference between Marwar and Sinlaku is significant. The turnaround in power and water, accessibility of the roads, just everything came together in a much quicker way. In Marwar, some places were without power for 6 months. So we're beginning to see the investment, the commitment to hardening our infrastructure. Those investments are paying off. Communities that are successful and sustainable invest in that kind of infrastructure because it is not in your best interest to have to start all over again with rebuilding it. Countries who put that kind of investment in place and invest in that for the long term are able then to use their economic activity to grow out other industries and businesses. They almost take power and water for granted. So I think we're on the verge of that now, or at least that's kind of the takeaway from the last typhoon. But again, we didn't experience it in the way that our neighbors have in Chuuk and Saipan. Part of that investment really came from military investment, saying they can't be down without operational capacity. Next slide, please. So for Guam, this disruption is not an interruption. It's the operating environment. It's the way of life here. And we are all really good at it. With Sinlaku and whatever comes next, it's immediate, local, present. The Iran war, both of these are happening simultaneously for us. But the Iran war is distant in origin, but it has a local effect. The fuel costs, the energy costs are significant. What we need to leverage is what we're good at, is our resilience. You need to leverage your liquidity, your adaptability, and your strategic positioning. And this isn't the problem. This is what we do. This is our work. So I'd like to close with this. That through this disruption, we always achieve gains. We always learn from them. And I am very proud of the business community here that works together to figure out not just what you're doing in your own industry, in your own business to be successful, but the time is really now, especially with this sustainment, to think about how collectively you come together to think about what is the industry, what is the future of business for the island of Guam. If tourism is where it is, if defense is going to be changing, it's over to you to figure out what industries do you put in place? How do you grow out the economy of Guam with the investment that's here? And from the School of Business and Public Administration side, we have many students who look to a future of employment and talk about uncertainty. There's not certainty that they will have the jobs that they thought they would have. We are faced with students saying, I don't want to spend 4 years. I don't want to spend all this kind of money for 4 years. With what's on the other side of that? What's the return on that investment? So we're finding that many of our students are saying, we don't want work-life balance, we want work-life integration. So we're going to work and go to school and manage all of this in a much more fluid way. And many of you are probably seeing that with your workforce saying, well, I think I want to do this right now. I don't want to show up right now. I want to do something else. So what we're trying to do is adapt with you to help with that workforce. And keep as many employed here on Guam before they go somewhere else. So I really appreciate this opportunity to kind of show some of the highlights here. Again, the slides, I'll happily share them with you through the chamber. And any questions or anything else that we can add to this, we're going to be watching it. This is kind of a big overview for you to kind of take away and see what you can do with it. And I trust that you'll do amazing things. So thank you all for your time today. Any questions from the floor?
I was looking at the employment numbers, and we know that the construction companies have brought in H-1B. Did that include H-1B workers or just local workers?
That was local employment.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. It's Keith Cruz, the Director of Decision Science with Pinpoint, and also I think one of your former students at UOG. I took an economics class about 15, 16 years ago. So I have a couple of good questions about some of the assumptions that are structural. So I saw two mentions with the GDP recovery. I don't think it's a structural, I don't think it's a cyclical issue. I think with Japan, Korea, Taiwan, their economies, because of their demographic decline, we may have a runway of about 2035, 2040. And then the assumptions around the military buildup, we're thinking there's going to be so much spending off base that really it was a political move, not a strategic move. Meaning there were too many assaults happening from the Marines in Okinawa, and we're thousands of miles away from the first island defense, right? Taiwan, Philippines, Japan. So I live in Arizona. I'm just curious, what are risk assessments you think we should be doing to, we have all these assumptions that tourism comes back if the military stays around, but the possibility is that those Marines get moved elsewhere, and maybe their families stay. So just your thoughts there, I would appreciate it.
let's see if I can answer some of that. What I mean by tourism is, and by the way, we do have hotels that are filled. They're just not the tourists who are here for vacation only. What I'd like to see is tourism with a purpose. And when we have conferences and conventions that come here, that's tourism with a purpose. They're coming here not just for a 3-day vacation just to get away from the cold weather, but they're coming here and they're going to be here for a week and they're going to spend money and they're coming from other places and they're leaving their money here. Significant money here. So I'm not saying that tourism is going away. It will always be here, but I think we need to leverage that to a higher level. So when we have conferences and meetings, military who are here, and their families come here to see them. I was on a flight when coming back just recently, and there was someone sitting next to me, and he was from New Jersey, and he's an IT person, and he works here because of the military. And he was sitting in a first-class seat, and he said, my son just won some award, and I'm going back in 10 days because I want to see him get that award, and then I'll be back to Guam. So I thought, what company can afford to send you first class to Guam, and then back again next week, and then back again? But that's built into their contracts. So I think that we've structured our economy to think in terms of these pillars, that they're not integrated. That we think of tourists as somebody who wants to get away for a vacation, but I think we're expanding that now to say, how do we make a broader view of that? I think that we've often compared ourselves or aspired to be a lot like Singapore, and I was just in Singapore a couple months ago. And I don't think we want to be Singapore. I don't think we'd like the high, tall buildings on every block. Very little green space. That's not us. But one of the things that is key to that economic development was that they used tourism as a way of leveraging their employment base. There were jobs that the people could fill until they could figure out what they wanted to be known for. They didn't want to lose tourism, but they wanted to grow, and they wanted to be the financial sector. They wanted to rival Hong Kong. And so that's the way that they built out their future. What I'm saying about Guam is you are in the same position now. You have a base of tourism. You have this military investment. What are you going to do with it to get that concept of who do we want to be that's greater than how we became? And we're not having that conversation. And I think from that we can be better off with both, but we need that third pillar. Does that help?
Past Chair?
Sorry, I'll just make it really quick. There's been a lot of talks about military realignment in this part of the region, especially with the war in Iran. On top of that, what I'm hearing also is Japan and Korea. There was a time when Japan wanted to move the Marines out of Okinawa, but there's also talks now trying to keep as many of them there because of the new threat from China. Now, there's also been talks about how that would impact us because they're saying that, some of that military construction that's going on right now might get scaled down. Have you heard anything about this, or have you been following this aspect of the military buildup?
I've heard something about scaling down to kind of spread the risk because the concentration of buildup has caught attention, and not necessarily for good. Going, okay, you have all of your assets confined in these spaces. So there is this talk of maybe we need to diversify our assets more broadly. So the conversation back to Okinawa is legitimate, and I think the initial was moving the Marines out because of the social issues that were going on there. Now we're giving way to what's the economic impact of losing that population and that money flow. So it could be that's why the 7 to 9 years is fluid, because we're looking at maybe we're not going to invest to the degree that we thought we were only on Guam. They are building out into the region, but that's kind of considered the Guam region buildup. But I think they're looking at how to share some of that wealth also with building partnerships and keeping political relations strong between the United States and Japan, the United States and Korea, and building friends through military investments elsewhere. That seems to be a strategy that has worked really well.
Thank you. We spoke earlier a little bit about veterans on island, and I just wanted to just touch on that again. You talk about needing tourists here. Our nonprofit has started to bring in money by helping our veterans to get their compensation. By doing that, that signals the federal government to send funds here, hire people, and allow our veterans to be cared for. Now, this is a program that has existed and is something that we might need to maybe take a look at to help the economy, because we don't have to go beg for them to fly into Guam, well, at least not yet, because they have veterans that also are within the Asian region, and these folks are folks that we can also bring to the island. What's happening is Hawaii is taking those veterans directly to Hawaii, which is 10 hours away. Now, these veterans in Asia would much rather travel to Guam. Now, are we setting up things to help these veterans want to come to Guam? And again, when we talk about that, we have a new building opening up in June up by GRMC. We have the expansion up at the Naval Hospital on the first floor, and we have the CBOC that's there. Not to mention the economy outside with the medical folks, they're already seeing patients. So, you know, FHP and American Medical Center, these folks, they're getting money from our veterans. So there's money coming in from the veterans side of the house. If we could invite more people in from Asia, build around that, study a little bit more, maybe do some research on how we can have them come here instead of going to Hawaii. Folks fly in from FSM to go to Hawaii and stop here in Guam. So how is it that we're not able to capture them? Maybe they're not a large number, but it's still another thing that we should be looking at. I've also heard on a different note that some folks want to invest in Guam. I'm hearing that a lot of these folks that are trying to invest are finding it hard to invest here. Are you noticing that as well? Or are there some folks looking to invest in Guam and a lot of their packets are stuck over at the Attorney General's office? I don't know that. It's something I'm hearing. So I'm wondering, are there people that want to invest, or is this something that, you know, nobody wants to come to Guam?
That's a lot more than.
Was that? Just next question. Well, let me just talk to this. When we talk about infrastructure, we often think about the power, water, but I think the social infrastructure is also what you're getting at with what is our health system and our hospital capacity. And I think we are beginning to invest in that and realize the value of having a strong, supportive social infrastructure, meeting those needs. And I think you're right, in terms of following the numbers, the more people who are coming here and want to stay here, the more it reinforces the need for a flow of funds to come to support that. As I travel around and I know a lot of young military folks who were once here on Guam, and they have such fond memories of Guam. They just speak so highly of it that if, and many of you in this room have probably had the same experience, if someone knows that you're from Guam, they just are, they beam, they help you, because they know someone or they've been someone who was on Guam. So I'm not sure that we have really captured how we turn that kind of goodwill into come and stay here.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the presentation, some of the messages you brought. One thing on the presentation is I cannot compare Mauer to what we just went through because we barely got touched. And I do not expect a fraction of the amount of federal funds that came in under Mauer to come under this storm, which is the best of the worst of cases for Guam because there's not that positive economic influx from federal subsidies and programs going to come in. I do see that you're painting a long-term image of the economy of Guam and where we're going, but it seemed to me, and I just want to confirm, that you're sort of telling the chamber, you need to be proactive, not reactive, and start thinking what you need to do to grow this economy in a different direction. Is that also a call by the university, if I'm correct, to work in cooperation with the chamber to achieve that more joint future vision of what we need to be and what we need to get going?
A couple of things there. I speak for myself as being kind of this economic lens. And I've been here a while and have done a number of studies in which I needed to look at business licenses, for example. And where I came from was this view of you needed an economic engine of small business. And after going through all of this and looking at it, I just kind of said, this is a place of too many small businesses. Other places are struggling because they have too few small businesses to kind of start up and get things going. My sense is that we have too many small businesses, and the Small Business Administration has done a great job. What I'm looking for is how we don't have the infrastructure to move those small businesses into medium-sized businesses into large businesses, and that's the pathway that's missing. That everybody is happy to have a small business, but taking that next step and growing it and partnering, and that is that infrastructure that sustains business. And it's not something that the School of Business alone can handle. I can share that insight, but it's just an insight. It's just some information. So I'm looking to see who has enough critical mass to get behind something to say, who are we going to become? How do we take what we have and take it to the next step? And I can't do that. I've got my own issues about how to deal with this transition from the School of Business and Public Administration, universities in general being this academic center, not real world, not connected. And I'm trying to make it, students don't want to just be in a classroom and learn stuff. They want to do things too. They want credentials. They want applied learning. And that's a huge shift for universities. So that's what I'm working on that side, is connecting as many of my students as I can to get them out there. And they have bright ideas. But I need the chamber, I need any other organization to say, think about a consolidating, a unifying agenda that brings all businesses up and creates prosperity. Some of the things that I've heard is that some of the mom and pop stores right now, doing 5,000 a week, are now doing 15,000. Now, that's only going to last as long as the inventory lasts. And it's only going to last as long as the need is there for that. But some of the cash flows that come through is real economic stimulus. I agree with you, this is not Marwar. And it's not Marwar because it didn't hit us in the same way, but also we didn't have the outages. We didn't have losing our internet capacity. And that's really credit to GPA and others who have really put in an infrastructure that we didn't have much of a blow for that. But we'll pay a price for that because we won't get the federal dollars. But maybe that's a good price to pay because it's the signal that we've got to raise our own revenue and not look for the next disaster to come. It gets us back into what are we going to build? What capacity do we own? And I think it's here. We just, and I don't know what it is exactly. I look at additive manufacturing and say, we have manufacturing here? Our history around manufacturing has not been a successful one. How do we make sure this succeeds? What do we do? And that's one voice, and maybe a few voices. But if we can get power behind that voice of everyone kind of looking at this in an organized way, I think we've got some opportunity here. And I don't want to miss it. 7 to 9 years goes by quickly. And we're all busy doing our own thing. But who's looking at, what do we do? Where do we go? What's next?
Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you, Dr. Jones. Before we end, and I know it's at 1 o'clock more, I just want to say a few things. To what Juan Carlos had mentioned, you know, the chamber is going to be working on a 2030 plan. To your point, and what we want to do, if there's any one organization that can make a change, it's going to be the chamber. We push for the decrease in the GRT. We're still wanting to keep that on hold, but we also have other items that we continue to fight. I know there's some housing legislation going out there. All this legislation being prepared, and you wonder if it's just automatically done or if it's political season and everyone wants to get their name out there. But it has to be smart. To Anthony's position, you know, the chamber recognizes all the problems. And to Dr. Jones's point, we need to one voice, one consolidated group. It cannot be done. I remember listening to Congressman Hines' speech in the CNMI. And I love the idea that we want to create new industry, and we should. But she mentioned that, you know, and she's very right. If you took, like, for example, the farm industry, agriculture industry, there's not enough land on Guam and Saipan to be able to generate enough revenue to be able to offset the loss in the tourism side. And that's the reality. And more importantly, it's going to take years for us to be able to generate new industry, to be able to offset the decline. As such, the one industry that we cannot lose focus in on is our tourism industry. That's been our lifeline for years. You know, Dr. Jones mentioned manufacturing. We've seen it come and go in the early 70s. And so we need to keep an eye on it. I shared an article from a Korean newspaper about whether or not this place in Vietnam is going to replace Guam and Saipan for families. And when I read the article, I was kind of shocked because the amount of amenities that they were providing. I was like, man, who's going to come and put all that money in there? And so, of course, I used my friend, my Chad Guerrero, Palomo, Tenorio, Chad GPT to kind of, to kind of give me some ideas. Well, what can we do? And I was surprised because it was speaking to me like I was right in front of it, right? So like, I'm going to be very blunt with you. You cannot compete against these guys. He goes, you need to redo and relook at your industry. And some of the ideas is that you can't compete against price. You cannot. We cannot. And we shouldn't market ourselves as that. And so to what Dr. Jones had mentioned, is that we have to put together a group to really formalize and look at how we can become more of a destination developer, highlighting safety, highlighting the U.S., etc. It's not the fun, family, beach, etc. And also to attract some of those hotels and developers. I mean, it's amazing. We have great hotels. We need to be able to figure out how to support these hotels. One of the things, there's going to be strong headwinds. Dr. Jones mentioned something very positive in that we're the next 7 years, we're going to have to build up. But the forecasts on the yen and the won are not very bright. From the 20 up to 2027, 28, it's not going to drop to 140 where we need to get it below. For us to be able to get the tourism back to that level, we gotta get the yen to about 135, and that's a long way when you're talking at 160 right now. You gotta get the yuan to drop below 1,300 when it's almost near 1,500. So that said, this is not the business, private sector issue. This is an island issue where we have to come together and work together to build up. We have an opportunity. The window's small and it will close. Things will happen. If we get another storm, thank goodness Sinaloa didn't hit us. We'd probably have to power out a little longer than what, and not putting down GPA because those guys are great people and I don't want my power turned off is what I'm gonna say. But, really 5-7 days we're out of power and it was a tropical storm. I think we could do a little bit better, but I'm not there for, I know those guys do a lot of work. But that said, I can go on for another 25 minutes. I hope you don't mind, but I'm just joking. Anyhow, all right, I think I've said enough. And anyone else have any questions? All I know is we have some headwinds. We have a small window of opportunity. And this year counts. If we don't make a change in our political leaders to be able to move our agenda, the agenda we want, if we don't make that change this year, then it's not going to happen, and we're going to be stuck. So I encourage all of you to talk to your employees to make sure they're registered to vote, and especially when voting time comes, to get them out there to vote. Okay, so anything else? Anybody have any questions? You want me to shut up? I'll be more than happy to. Okay. Anyhow, anything else, Ms. Cat? Thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you next month.